So today I specifically want to talk about the future of work. So I'm a futurist. I talk about the future in many different areas: innovation, collaboration, leadership. And now let's look at the future of work, which is a really big topic. So I'm going to narrow it down to look at the future workplace and what that means for people working in those workplaces. So in addition to my material here, I really want to credit my friend Chris Pudney, who is a co-author of this book that we wrote some years ago called Out of Office, which is all about how to use the internet to get greater freedom in your work life. And a lot of this material comes from the podcast that we run called Out of Office, which you can get at outofofficebook.com. You can subscribe to the podcast and you can buy the book there as well. So I really want to credit Chris because half this material is his as we talk about the future of the workplace, the future workplace. So, as we go, what I'd like you to do is keep in mind some actions that you can actually take away and put into practice. So there might be some things that you can say, yep, I really need to do this right away, so please do that today or tomorrow. There may be some things that you put on your to-do list that you're going to do in the short term. And there may be some other things which are bigger changes to your workplace and the way you do work, which you might set aside as a 90-day project. So as you write down your action items from today, classify them into those three areas. We have also got a special report that Chris and I wrote called The Workplace of the Future. And when you finish the webinar today, you'll be asked to fill in an exit survey. And if you do that, fill in the exit survey, I'll send you a copy of this short report that we've written, which goes into a little bit more detail in the things that I'm talking about today. So if you want more details, then it's available to you in that special report. Okay, so let's look at the reason that work has changed. And it really comes down to one thing, that people want flexibility. So there's been a lot of changes in what technology allows us to do, in infrastructure, in the changing demographics, but all of that comes down to one thing, which is that people want flexibility. And if you can see on this map here, you can see at the bottom the caption that says, people willing to take a pay cut for flexible work privileges. So I want to show you what people around the world are looking for from their workplaces now. So in countries like Brazil and India, which are two of the emerging economies in the 21st century, more than half of employees who surveyed said that they were willing to take a pay cut in order to have more flexible work. And we'll talk about what that means soon. In the US and Japan, it's lower, but still quite high. In Europe, again, it's around the 30%. And what about us? What about us in Australia? Well, more than half of employees say they're willing to take a pay cut for flexible work privileges. I reckon the real test is in this other survey, which was run by Citrix, and there's a certain percentage of people who've never worked remotely, in other words, they've never worked from home or as telecommuters, who would give up alcohol in order to work remotely at least one day a week. Now, I'm going to ask you to guess what that percentage is. And the person who gets closest to the correct answer, I'll send them a copy of my book, The Future of Leadership. So if you'd like to take a guess now, just type in the question box what percentage of people you think who've never worked remotely would give up alcohol in order to have that as a privilege. Okay, I can see some people saying 75, 58, 75, 85, 18, 63, 30. Okay, great. So let me tell you the answer. The answer is 32% of people. And the person who was closest to that was Ian Berry. So great, Ian, I'll send you a copy of my book. I know you already have one, but you now have a gift copy as well. So, this is one of the things that's changing. So people want flexible work and conditions. And it's not only a workplace, but that's the thing that's driving it. So technology enables it, but it's actually people's desires to have a different kind of work. So if you look at, whoops, I missed that. The question I'd really like to look at today is, what if there were no offices? What if we didn't have the concept of an office? At the moment, the traditional workplace is the office, and most of the changes that are happening are trying to make things as good as an office, or trying to look at how can we make an office more flexible. But I'd rather take a more radical approach and say, what if there were no offices? Well, we might ask these sort of questions. Where does work happen? How does it get done? When does it happen? Who does the work? And why do we work? So I'm going to explore these 5 areas. And as I said, this is a really big topic. So I'm just going to give you a glimpse into some possible answers for each of these 5 questions. So where, how, when, who, and why. And some of this might seem revolutionary, but I just warn you that it's also evolutionary. So you might see some ideas here which you think they're not going to happen, or I couldn't possibly make that happen in my workplace. And yet, those are the sort of things that have happened in the last 5 to 10 years and are going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years as well. And you might be able to implement little ideas from there, which will help you become, as I said, fit for the future. Okay, so let's look at the first thing, which is the obvious thing, is that if there were no offices, where does work happen? Well, the answer is work happens anywhere and everywhere. So people are working from home, and that means that they have things like these treadmills that they use while they're working. They're working from coffee shops, which are now increasingly understanding that they need to provide good Wi-Fi and other facilities. They're working from airport lounges while they're on the go and while traveling. They're working from co-working spaces, which are like offices, but instead of you sitting alongside your colleagues, you're sitting alongside other people who are working independently or part of a distributed team. There may even be other employees. They're just not employed by the same company. Everyone's just sitting there, and they have the camaraderie, the support, the collaboration opportunities to talk to other people who are doing the same thing, even though they don't work for the same organization. There's a place called Dexter's Place in Sydney. One of these, it's a beautiful new place that I got the chance to have a tour of that when I was last in Sydney. And it's again one of these co-working spaces where there are meeting rooms, there are conference rooms, and there are places that you can call your office, even if you didn't have an office. As I was putting together the slides for this presentation yesterday, I was working at one of my favorite places, well, my favorite workplaces, sitting in a cafe by the river with a coffee and just putting together the slides for this presentation. You can even work from while you're commuting. And this is an example you can see here. This is Google's driverless cars. And pretty soon we will have driverless autonomous cars, which mean that the cars will take us from A to B while we can work. So it's like working on public transport, except it's very much private transport. But it is one of those things which I think is significant. It's significant because it's one of those things that you think you can't do at the moment, and that's true, but technology is enabling us to do that in the future. Okay, so then the next question is, if we're all working from different places, how does work actually get done? And the key to this is that increasingly work is going to become digital and distributed. Digital means that instead of having files, you have as physical files and folders and sheets of paper, you will have electronic files and folders, and everything's going to be online. Everything's going to be in the cloud. Distributed means that instead of everybody physically being in the same place, people are going to be in different places. As you can see, if people are working from their cars and from coffee shops and from co-working spaces, they're not always going to be physically in the same place. In fact, the idea of physically being in the same space is going to be seen as an expensive luxury. It's like now going to a conference is sometimes seen as a perk. In the same way, going to an office or going to meet people in person is going to be seen as an expensive option that you're only going to use if there's no other option available. And so then things like collaboration change. For example, in the eGurus community, which is my membership site that I run, we're currently running a 90-day collaborative program where everyone's working on their goals for 90 days. And we're using this software called iDoneThis, iDoneThis.com, to share what we do each day. And it's available. So it means that we get accountability, we get support, we get encouragement, we get ideas, and everyone is working independently and remotely, but tools like iDoneThis allow us to collaborate and work effectively just as we would if we were working in an office. Okay, so I have a question for you. Which I'd like you to answer in the question box, and I'm going to keep this anonymous, but I'm really curious to know, in your business, in your organization, in your team, what are the things that you're currently doing that aren't in the cloud, so they aren't digital and they aren't online, but should be? So, for example, a couple of years ago, I switched from MYOB to Xero. MYOB accounting package, which was running on my PC, and now I've switched over to Xero, which is running completely in the cloud. And it does a number of things. So one is that I can then outsource my accounting and bookkeeping work to somebody else because it's not just sitting on my PC. It means that I can access it from anywhere, and it means that my accountant can access it at any time as well. Now, MYOB also has an online version, so I could have done it the same way. Similarly, I switched from Outlook to Gmail. Outlook was running completely on my PC, and Gmail runs completely in the cloud. So I'm curious to know if you just got something that you type in the question box, and I'll keep this anonymous, things that you know you should, and I don't like using the word should in general, but I'm using it here because, at the back of your mind, wow, this would be so much easier if it was online and accessible to everybody. So that's why I'm using the word should here. What should you move into the cloud? I'll give you an example. For me, I still do my presentations on PowerPoint on my laptop, and if I had them in the cloud, then I'd be able to again use them, do them from anywhere. I'd be able to outsource some of the slide design and things like that. So someone says their CRM is still on the server, so it's accessible but clunky because it's behind a VPN. Yeah, project plan development, writing, PowerPoint. Okay, somebody else is saying the same thing. Microsoft Word, yep. Even simple things like documents. And of course, there is now an online version of Microsoft Word, so you can have all your documents online, or you can use something like Google Docs where you have shared documents. Okay, let me read this other one. Working through the process of transferring all our programs and documents to the cloud. Yep, Office 365 and Dropbox for documents. Your full diary, many docs are still only on my laptop. Yeah, exactly. So just keep in mind that moving things to the cloud, even if you don't see an immediate benefit, does prepare you for the future. It does help you become fit for the future, because in the future, work is going to be done not just from individual laptops, but you're enabling yourself to do that. Even if it takes a little bit of work now, even if there's a bit of short-term pain, it's worth doing it because there's a huge long-term gain to it. Okay, thank you everyone for sharing there. Okay, so the next thing is, when does work happen? So now you're not going to have people coming into an office working 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 6 or 7 till 7, as sometimes happens, and being in there in the same at the same place at the same time all the time. So work is going to happen whenever it needs to happen to meet an outcome. What I mean by that is that work can happen anytime. It doesn't mean that people can just waltz into work, in their dressing gown, go and work on their laptop for a couple of hours and then goof off for the rest of the day. If they have to meet an outcome, and if their work is integral to that, then they have to do the work. But the key is that you're focusing on the outcome. And this is one of the biggest challenges for managers and leaders, especially established managers and leaders have to learn to reward results, not activity. So when I was first a manager in the early 90s, we were taught things like, you could go and talk to people over the partitions, because we were just there in cubicles or partitions. You'd have informal chats with people in the lunchroom. Can't do that anymore because people aren't in the same lunchroom. We used to have this concept called MBWA, which many people would have come across if you've been doing management and leading for a while, which is management by walking around, which is simply saying, rather than looking at spreadsheets and documents, you actually go around and talk to people. So some of those things are really valuable, but they're just not possible anymore. They're just not practical anymore. And the key, what that's been replaced with, is the ability to, or the focus on results, not activity. So you kind of got to get over the idea that people are going to have to be at work, and you can look over that, peer over their shoulders and make sure they're at work during certain working hours. If somebody is given 2 days to do a task and they do it in 2 hours and then spend the next day and a half goofing off and doing nothing else work-related, you've got to kind of be happy with that. Now, I know there are some other issues around that because other people might need them for other things. So there's some things around accessibility and availability. But in principle, managers and leaders in the workplace of the future have to understand that it's all about results, not activity. And there are plenty of examples of this in the real world. Any open source software is developed this way. It's developed where there are people around the world working independently, do a little bit of work, send it to a central place for this to be integrated into the software, and people generally don't care how and when that work was done, as long as it achieved the results that it set out to achieve. This is a big shift. And if you're a manager, a leader, a business owner, and you've been used to rewarding activity and being able to do some of these things that you can see on the screen now, just be aware that there's a huge shift required in your mindset in order to be able to work and work effectively in the workplace of the future. Okay, the next one is who actually does the work. Well, the answer is the work is done by the best people for the job. Now you might go, well, duh, that's pretty obvious. And yet, in many workplaces, can you really say that the job or the project is done by the best people in the world who could possibly do this job? Because that's what the workplace of the future is going to offer. See, we've always had temporary and permanent staff. We've always had some people in office and some people distributed or remote, if you like, but the focus is shifting. So the permanent in-office staff, which are the in-office staff, are currently the majority of workers. They're employed and they're in an office. We also sometimes bring in contractors into an office, so we're talking about larger organizations. We have a few people who are telecommuters, and telecommuters are permanent staff who choose to work from home or to work from away from the office. And then we have freelancers, and freelancers are those temporary staff who aren't in the office, and we bring them in on a project by project basis. So we've kind of always got these four groups of people. The change is that now we're going to move more towards the top of this diagram. So we're going to have more freelancers and more telecommuters. It's probably going to start with more telecommuters, and that's already happening. So these are permanent staff who don't work from an office, but also we're going to have more freelancers, people who are independent agents who work on jobs as required, and they will bid for jobs. Maybe even little teams would get together and they'll bid on jobs, and employers will pick the best people in the world to do the projects and the jobs. So there's going to be far fewer of these permanent in-office staff and in-office contractors. Okay, for example, let me give you an example here. And it's a little bit easier for me because I'm an independent, I'm a solopreneur. So my business is just me with a whole bunch of freelancers. And for some of us who are working in small businesses or solopreneurs, we're already doing a lot of this. I have a service called Business Book in a Box where I work with authors or experts to write a book for them. I don't want to talk about that today, but if you're interested, go to businessbookinabox.com. What I want to point out is that the team that I've got behind me is distributed around the world. So here I am in Perth, Australia, and so I do the interviews with the author, and then they get transcribed. And I've got a transcriber in Sri Lanka, where I was born, and transcriber in Romania. And then the transcription gets sent to writers, and I've got a writer in South Africa and 2 writers on the east coast of Australia. And then they do the writing, and later on, when we get ready to print the book, I get my book covers designed. I've got a designer in Canada and a designer in the Czech Republic. And the final version of the book, there's some proofreading that's done by somebody in Perth, and I get my printing done in Perth, and they can ship worldwide. Or the printing gets done in China if it's a really big print run. But the point I'm making is that my team is distributed, and I really don't care when the people do the work. I just know I've got the best people for the job, and they work to deadlines and they work to milestones. In fact, one of them, the proofreader in Perth, is my 78-year-old dad, who has been retired for many years now and just decided a few months ago that he wants to start a new career as a proofreader. So he's now available online to do proofreading. Now, he's not that wasn't his career. He was an accountant. He was a chartered accountant, but he's got a great command of written English. He's got fine attention to detail. So why not? Why can't he be the best person in the world to do that? Just because he's stuck in Perth, Australia, doesn't mean that he can't offer his services anywhere around the world. So I'm curious to know, where in the world is your team? So I've got a poll here, and I'm going to show the poll now. So if you think about your team and where they are in the world, there's a number of different. So this is apart from you. Where are the people in your team? There are a number of options there, and you should be able to tick more than one. So the way the polls work for people who are new is you can answer as many as you want, and it's all anonymous, and I'll just show you the results afterwards. Okay, so you can see there are options going from full-time, so you have people working in the office with you, to people who are sometimes there or not. They may be part-time or casual, or there are people who are never in the office. So for me, I would have all my team members are never in the office. But I have another client I was speaking to last week, and she lives in Singapore, and she has somebody who comes into the office as a personal assistant a few days a week, who's there pretty much full time, but just for a few days a week. Okay, I can see most people have voted. So I'm just going to keep the polls open for another 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you. Okay, let me show you the results there. Okay, so as you can see here, there's quite a mix, and it's really interesting that the majority have people who are never in the office. So all their staff, they've got staff or team members who are never in the office. So they are working in distributed teams. If you're in that group, that's fantastic, because it means you've set up your systems, at least some of your systems, to enable that sort of work to happen. And the more of that you can enable, even if you're not doing a lot of it now, the better, because it really will set you up and enable you to work effectively in the workplace of the future. Even if you don't quite see how that's going to happen right now, it's great that you've got that set up. And if you're one of these people who doesn't have that set up, just try and find ways that you can make that happen, even if it's in little ways. Try to do some distributed work. Try to send some work out to freelancers. Feel what it's like to be a manager or leader who's relying on them delivering by deadlines, and figure out how to make that work. Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you for taking part. Okay, so the last one is probably the most important, and I've left it to last because it really is important, and this is about why do we work? So what's the reason that people work now? Now, obviously, some people need to work because they need to make a living, but more and more people want to make a difference as well. So they want work that makes a difference in their lives. Let me show you some research that was done. The Gallup organization did some research, and they asked employees, what do you most want from work? And they came up with these 6 things. So things like super, interesting work, job security, skills, good holidays, being able to work independently. Here's a catch. That research was done a generation ago. Okay, so that's what people wanted a generation ago. Now, Harvard did some research a couple of years ago about what they call the best workplace on earth. And again, they asked a similar sort of question. And these are 6 things that their research showed. Identity, so let me be myself. Information, tell me what's really going on, not just in my job, but in the whole organization. Discover and magnify my strengths, so this is about accelerating experience and learning and development. Give me a place where I can say I feel proud to work here, and give me work that's meaningful. And then the last one is, okay, I know I need systems and processes, but don't get in the way with stupid rules. So you can see the shift that's gone from here's what I want my employer to provide for me to what's happening now is here's the environment where I can shine, and I want my employer to support me as an individual. So that's a shift in why people want to work. So are you providing that sort of workplace? Are you providing this sort of workspace for the people in your team? Okay, so in summary, if you look at the future of work, it comes down to these things. So work happens anywhere and everywhere. It's distributed and digital. It happens when it needs to, based on outcomes. The people who do the work are the best people for the job. And we do work because we want to make a difference, not just for money. Okay, so I'm going to quickly stop and see if there's any questions before we finish up. Okay, so I'm going to keep this one anonymous unless the person wants me to say who it is. It says, I've been increasingly frustrated with managers trying to upskill permanent staff into areas that aren't their strength. Yep, when it would be much simpler and easier to outsource those jobs while making better use of permanent staff skills. And that's exactly right. One of the things I didn't say was that increasingly in the workplace of the future, employees or the workers are going to take responsibility for their own upskilling, their own skills and experience training. And if their employers do that for them, that's a bonus. But more and more, they're going to take responsibility for that themselves. So thank you for sharing there. Any other questions? Okay, great. So just a reminder, as I said at the start of today's webinar, I said, what are you going to take away and do? And I'd really like to not know personally, but I'd really like you to make a note of the things that you're going to do in the today or tomorrow, in the next 2 weeks, or in the long term. And if you'd like to share them in the question box, please do. I'll keep them anonymous, but sometimes people do get value from hearing what other people are going to go away and do. So please type them in and I'll read them out. Yeah, I did this. Actually, it's called idonethis.com. So it's really useful if you want to do online collaboration with a team. It's just a way for team members to kind of gel better together and help each other. Okay, if you are booking conference speakers, then the Future of Work presentation is the one that's probably most closely related to this topic, which is one of my conference keynote topics. I also have the Future of Leadership. So if you're a leader or manager and you want to lead in this fast-paced world where the workplace is changing, then the Future of Leadership is a good presentation, or the Future of Productivity and Performance. And I customize all my presentations, so these are just samples here. Okay, let's see some other comments coming in. Going to get the Out of Office book. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Engage a virtual assistant to keep my database up to date. Yep. Okay, comment here, 90 from Ian Berry. 90-day projects really work. I've been on them and helping others with them for a very long time. Yeah, I agree, Ian. Those 90-day projects are perfect for giving you long enough time to actually get something significant done, but short enough that you actually can achieve something and the world's not going to change around you too quickly so that the goal becomes unachievable. So it actually is possible to do it in a 90-day project. What's coming up next is I've got a webinar series. It's a webinar series running over 3 weeks, starting this Thursday, in fact. So it runs every Thursday for 3 weeks, and it's all about innovation in your business. And it's a bit of a kickstart for 2016. So I've set this up as a 3-part series. It's a little bit more, actually a lot more in-depth than the webinar you're on today, because it'll actually take you through how to set up your business for 2016 to be more innovative. And I heard somebody recently say, if you just do the same old thinking, you'll get the same old results. So this is about thinking differently. If you're an eGurus member, then you can register for it free. So just go to the eGurus community and register. If you're not an eGurus member, it costs $197, and you can go to gihanperera.com, and there's a big button on the right-hand side, and you can register there. So please do that. I'd love to have more people coming along, and I'd love to help more people really kickstart their business innovation for 2016. If you're interested in finding out more about what I do, then you can go to gihanperera.com and you can find out about all my services. So the speaking, the mentoring, the business book in a box service, if you're interested in that as well. And just a reminder that you get an exit survey at the end of this webinar. It'll pop up, and if you just complete that, if you'd like a copy of that, I will send you a copy of that report that Chris and I wrote called The Workplace of the Future. So thanks everyone for coming along. Really appreciate you being here for my first Future-Proof webinar for 2016, and I'd love to see you back next time. You'll get the reminders automatically if you're already registered for the webinar series. If you're not registered and you're just watching the recording, then at gihanperera.com you can register for the webinar series. It doesn't cost anything, and I always want to give you something of value to think about for building your business and being fit for the future. Thanks everyone. Bye for now.